Hey, it's me and Buster Green. So someone asked me to do a quick review of Gigabash, and after I finished Megaton Musashi, a few people in my fan club wanted me to play Gigabash. So because enough people were curious, I got the game, but I was kind of hesitant. I only really bought the game because it was on sale for the end of summer sale, and I picked it up alongside the first Godzilla DLC because of my immense respect for Godzilla and the fact this game is heavily based around 1990s Heisei Godzilla, who quite frankly is my Godzilla, so I bit the bullet. Okay, so I like this game a lot. It's essentially like a remix of the old GameCube, PS2 Godzilla games like Godzilla Save the Earth, but with original characters and a control setup that is very, very ripped off from Smash Brothers, which is cool because Smash Brothers is easy to play and anyone can play it. But unfortunately, I cannot recommend this game because this game is intensely unfinished. And as it currently stands, I have no idea if it will ever be finished. So yeah, my 1 cent review of this game is do not buy this game yet. Now, it kind of reeks suspiciously of a game that's basically a demo for a better version of it that will come out later, like a sequel or something. And the sequel is the real game. That's sort of Gigabash. Like, it kind of echoes that like weak Nickelodeon Smash Brothers clone for a few years back that instantly ran out of hype and goodwill. But then recently they relaunched it as a more polished sequel that I think more people liked. I don't know. I didn't play the sequel because the first one burned me too bad. Now, if you don't have friends to play with it at a party, then this game sucks, and it basically has like under 4 hours of content, which is not acceptable for the $28 price tag that it comes with. It also becomes more like a $45 game if you bite the bullet and buy all the Godzilla and Ultraman character DLCs. Now, I will say that the Gigabash engine is really promising, and I think for what it could grow into as a fighting game, it's a pretty awesome idea because it's basically like an open, anyone can join in Godzilla Smash Brothers at the end of the day, but unfortunately it's just too bare bones of a game right now with a handful of characters, some real balancing issues because I don't think they've ever balanced the game, and it's got a completely incomplete story mode. So let me go over the story mode first because there's not that much to go over here. Then I'll talk about the characters and finally the DLC. So the story mode is not finished. It only has stories for like 4 or 5 out of like the main 8 characters, and the stories are a little interconnected, but majorly off. So the first story is about Gorogong. Gorogong is like your pseudo King Kong, sort of Donkey Kong fighting style character, and he otherwise has the look of like a dorky Ultraman kaiju. Gorogong has this like brain dead look on his face. It's a little bit similar to Pigmon, and I guess he's supposed to be the game's mascot, but unfortunately he's not very fun to play as or very fun to look at. His story mode is a little bit hard to follow as it bounces back and forth between a legacy story about Gorogong became the deity of an unspecified island off the coast of Hawaii, and meanwhile in the current day he rampages through Honolulu in search of his precious power cylinder, which is some kind of power stone MacGuffin thing that all the monsters seem to want after. Now, playing through Gorogong's story is extremely rough because I would say that Gorogong is one of the weakest and worst fighters in the entire game. He has a bunch of extremely inaccurate moves, and most of his moves consist of timed punches and throwing garbage randomly. In fact, the only way I got through his story mode was by randomly throwing garbage, and every once in a while it would hit the bad guy and I'd win. This, mixed in with the learning curve of being new to the game, really makes Gorogong's story the worst story in the game, and a bit of an obstacle to casual players who just want to get into this game. I really wish retroactively that the game had more of a standard select your story mode, with all the stories being available from the get-go, because most of the stories barely build off of each other and have very minor connections aside for a few overlapping events. And what I'm getting at, starting with Gorogong was a mistake because Gorogong is literally the hardest of the 4 players to play as. So good luck. Now, if you beat Gorogong's story, then after that, it's a cakewalk. The next story is about Pippi Jaris, a character who's intensely a ripoff of Baltan Seigen from Ultraman. Ironically enough, Baltan Seigen got added into this game as DLC, so now the two of them can have an original versus the ripoff fight. Now, I actually love playing as Pippi Jaris. He's probably my favorite character to play as because he has a really brutal ranged shot attack, and he fights a lot like Mewtwo from Smash Brothers, and I can play as Mewtwo, so I can play as Pippi Jaris. His story is pretty basic though. He's just an alien and they took his spaceship and he wants his spaceship back. So he clashes with various military forces and some other aliens and then he gets the spaceship back. The end. Now the third story is about Wooly. Wooly is kind of cool and kind of cute. He's totally a ripoff of Kirby mixed with a ripoff of a Yeti, and he's another not very original character. However, considering he plays exactly like Kirby, screw it, he's fun to play as. But like Kirby, he's also a little bit broken because you can kind of like basically combo another character to death if you can just suck him in your mouth. So yeah, he's another kind of difficult character to play as, but he's so broken that like you really don't have anything to worry about. His story is super immature and kind of cute and has no real impact. And yeah, the only time I had trouble with story was I got a little bit stuck fighting against the skull snail because the skull snail would like deflect his sucking with the shell. And yeah, that's about it. Lastly, the final story is about Thundertross, who I want to keep calling Thundercleaves for some subconscious reason. 3 cams will kill him. Anyway, he's a Mazinger Gundam-style robot piloted by some little nerd who looks exactly like Pidge from Voltron. Holy copy infringing, Batman. Now, he has a very stereotypical anime story about how he wants to make his dad proud, and he's a little kid piloting a giant robot, but his dad has all these issues with an evil corporate backstabber that steals his Robotech and builds an evil black version of the robot. In the game, Thundertross is pretty awesome. He's a defensive character, he's got a Thunderbolt very reminiscent of Pikachu from Smash Bros, and later I got really good at using his defensive counterattack slash, which is a lot like Marth's counterattack slash from Smash. It just requires someone to attack you in the first place, but because of that, I imagine it could be a little bit difficult to use in multiplayer. And that's unfortunately it because this game is unfinished media. There's a bunch of other characters in this game, but the others just don't have stories and they're kind of just there. Some of them participate in the other characters' stories, but otherwise you just kind of like get to know them second-handedly. So let's go through the other characters now. Quickly going over who else there is. There's Skorak, who is the Skull Slug. He's a giant slug. He reminds me a lot of the Slug Kaiju from Ultra Q, so overall I like him. He's got a funny skull shell, and I think he's probably one of the most original characters in the game, and one of the characters in the game I hate the least because he's good enough. Next up is Gingaman, a fake Ultraman with a pot belly. He also is slightly featured in Thundertross's story with some implication that maybe he was Pidge's grandpa. Once again, it's ironic that we have a fake Ultraman in a game where he's to fight a real Ultraman. Otherwise, yeah, the fact that real Ultraman is in this completely overshadows him and makes him useless. Next up is Rohana, a flower girl in a ball gown. This character is very broken and is really hard to fight against because it's got like intense offensive abilities, and its only weak spot is jump attacks, which was really hard to clear in the story. I kind of hate this character, and it seems like just they made a character to be a girl for the sake of girls having a character, but I don't like this character. I could say it's very loosely like a ripoff of Biollante from the Godzilla series. Next up is Wawa, a armor dragon who kind of resembles the caterpillar form of Batra and a little bit Death Ghidorah, and otherwise it's just your generic dragon enemy. I really had nothing to say about him. He's weak and kind of pathetic. And rounding it out is Zaiwa, an evil crystal monster who is posited as the dangerous final boss of the game in Pippi Jurassi's story, but then later he just turns into like a generic rock monster and he's not that big a deal. So which was it then? Oh, and yeah, lastly and bestly, somehow least developed, is Concrete, who ended up being my favorite character in the game. Concrete is a stereotypical RPG mimic monster who is disguised as a building, and with the mimic being hot this year due to Firin and Dungeon Meshi, I gotta say it's the year of the mimic, and I gotta give Concrete as probably the most timely and interesting figure to be featured in this game. And that's about it as far as the original characters go. Overall, I'm kind of majorly let down by the original monsters in this game. Like, if I had to classify them, aside from Concrete, the Best Boy, and the Skull Slug, like, all of them can be split into characters that are fun to play as but unoriginal, or bad to play as and unoriginal, and just bad all around. Like, it's the same weak sauce character development that made the movie IF bomb at theaters because none of the characters really were anything new. For better or worse, the selling point of this game is not these characters, however. It's the other characters that you know and who have 100 years of history. It's Godzilla and Ultraman, guys. This game is basically still alive and basically still coming out with DLC because it became a game where Godzilla and Ultraman fight. And thank God that DLC is still coming out because it's still keeping this game relevant, and quite frankly, it's the only reason I eventually bought it. So yeah, this game is now half Ultraman, half Godzilla, and it's slowly over time becoming less of its own thing and more of just an awesome game where Ultraman and Godzilla punch each other to death. And I'm very cautiously hopeful that maybe they'll keep expanding the game and add in like some more crossovers, maybe throw in Evangelion Unit 1 or Shin Godzilla or maybe some Gundams or something. That'll keep it interesting. Anyway, right now I've only purchased the first Godzilla pack. I'm overall extremely let down by the DLC characters because at the end of the day, they're just characters you can play as, and that's kind of it. They don't have stories, they don't get added to the game's arcade mode. You can't even fight them in single player, which really bummed me out, because I bought Godzilla and Mechagodzilla and Gigan and Destroya, but there's no way to actually have them fight unless I can get another person playing the game with me to play multiplayer and play as one of them. Like, at least buying the Godzilla pack did add some vintage Godzilla art to the game, which at least makes me like it more. But alright, so yeah, the Godzilla presence here is excellent. Reviewing the Godzilla DLC, first off, we got the Big G-Man, Heisei Godzilla. He's got a few of Showa Godzilla's quirky moves, but overall, Godzilla's cool, but he does feel a little bit off compared to Godzilla in a game focused on Godzilla. Maybe I just didn't get fully used to using him that well because, again, this game has so little content that there's barely anything to do. Gigan's also in the game. If you want to play as Gigan and be Ghidorah's sidekick, he's got like the saw blade and everything. Then from the Millennium series, we got Mechagodzilla 3, aka Kiryu. Probably one of the most OP characters in the game. I beat arcade mode as Kiryu. He's got a variety of missiles and rifle guns, and he's just a powerhouse. Then rounding it out is the monster that killed Godzilla in 1995, Destroya. I didn't really play as Destroya much, but I am excited that Destroya and Hedorah are both in this game, because Destroya and Hedorah is a good matchup. So yeah, there's a second DLC pack that just came out a few months ago with Ghidorah and Hedorah. I haven't got that one yet because, like I said, the game's kind of not impressing me and kind of not gelling with me. I might buy it later though if I have a party and I'm drunk and someone says they really want to play as Hedorah and I take pity on them. Otherwise, Hedorah is tempting me because he is my favorite monster, but I don't have a lot of income to spend on this game right now because this game kind of sucks. Lastly, there's the Ultraman pack, which contains classic Ultraman, the Bald-Hand Seijin as his fighting buddy, Ultraman Tiga, and bad guy lady girlfriend from Ultraman Tiga as his fighting buddy. I don't know, I never saw more than the first 5 episodes of Tiga, but I guess she's from Tiga 2. I'm kind of surprised they just kind of picked from OG and Tiga, but it's cool, I guess. I would have preferred some more of the classic monsters, though. If they ever release an all Ultraman Monsters DLC, I'd be all about that. With the most recent Hedorah and Ghidorah pack only coming out a few months ago, I think there's still new DLC for this game in the works, but I really wish they could just keep to the game's main issues, maybe fix the balancing, maybe throw in some more stories for the characters in the game or the DLC characters. Anyway, that's Gigabash. Like I said, I can really only recommend this game if you're throwing a party and you guys want to play a Smash Brothers alternative where Godzilla punches Ultraman. Otherwise, if you're on this own, buyer beware, because I would say this game only has enough one-player content to not even fill a single afternoon. I beat this game's story mode in under 3 hours, and that's kind of nuts. I'm going to give Gigabash an extremely low 4 out of 10 because it just has all the signs that it's an unfinished demo, and it only has 3 hours of content. Pros, Godzilla and Ultraman can fight if you pay them to. Cons, 3 hours of gameplay. DLC monsters don't have stories or single-player game-like additions. Only 4 monsters in the game have a story mode, and the game really only has story mode, arcade, and multiplayer. So, yeah, this game is just not finished. It really feels like this game just exists as a stepping stone so that we eventually get Gigabash 2, and Gigabash 2 would theoretically have all these problems fixed, and probably would hopefully start with all the Godzilla and Ultraman characters unlocked. If they do ever make a Gigabash 2 like that, I think I would buy that right away. But anyway, that's Gigabash 1, and that's all there is to that. Don't say I didn't warn you if you still buy it and you're immediately disappointed after 3 hours like I was. Alright, I was Mr. Green. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to review. I will go out and review it if I haven't played it already, and I think it's worth it. Alright, thanks guys. Peace out. Good night.